So I'm super excited because Matt's here. He's the lead data scientist at a consultancy called Aspire 360. He's been doing this for a while. He's also a LinkedIn learning instructor. So if you want to learn about data science on LinkedIn, Matt's your guy. So I don't want to hold up the talk too much, but I'll just pass it over to you, Matt.
I am Matt, in case he hasn't already introduced you. So, LinkedIn learning instructor. I worked in the past for Home Depot, brings home security. Quite a few startups in East Asia doing machine learning, mostly product focused and pricing and e-commerce. So, have some experience with the AI product realm a bit. Let's get started. So, why are AI products the future? And let's start with where AI is now. I'm sure some of you already know, but let's at least give an overview. So, trends that I've been seeing in 2024, like strategic data acquisitions, training data to fine-tune AI, and enhance business use cases. We've seen this a few times already now with OpenAI buying out Reddit's data, them also buying out Stack Overflow's data. Idea is that data is seen as an asset rather than just something that you can just acquire from an API. That's been more of a change now I've seen with clients and with larger companies because data is no longer a free-for-all like it was in the 2010s. You have to they're charging more for like API calls, and they're also limiting what kind of data is available to you to enrich like your data sets. And that's big for AI because AI is based off its trained data sets. Text to video, well, Sora, and then we saw the Chinese model come out recently online where you can write text and it can generate the AI model. You can generate AI models. Industries have really been looking into that. Paramount, major companies like this, have been looking into it to simplify their workflows. We're not quite at the point where they're going to have a completely generated AI movie, but they are looking into it to like generate backgrounds, simplify stuff like that, and then generate stock video. And then multimodal AI. So using multiple modalities to create a single output. So for example, using text, video, pictures, or two different like forms of modalities, like different forms of text, to create an output in a different form, whether that's text or video. So AI and machine learning continue to be transformative technologies, but they're reshaping industries by enabling enhanced decision-making, deeper insight, and execution across business processes. What this means is AI is not taking your job. I wish it would. But it's enhancing and augmenting what's there already. If you have the context, if you have the knowledge, it's just going to speed your workflows up faster. So what are current AI challenges? Data. Well, it's always data. No matter what era you're in, it's data. When it was business analytics, it was, hey, where do we get the data to get for a dashboard? For when it was even in Excel time, same thing. AI is the same way. You still have to have enough data that's available and that's in the right format to be able to train it. One of the biggest myths I've seen when I'm working with clients is that, hey, we got all these data sets, we got this stuff in the cloud. We can train a model, right? Not exactly. What's the problem you're trying to solve, and why are you trying to solve it? You still have to engineer that data and feature engineer it to be able to even run the model, because it's still an algorithm. You have to know like what kind of inputs go into it. So that's the biggest challenge so far, and why OpenAI and other companies are looking to data as a strategic asset. 2, scaling. Can you handle the data or the infrastructure? I've seen this a few times. They build out a model. They have some very smart people, much smarter than me. I look at their GitHubs and I'm amazed. But they can't deploy it. So they deploy the model to the cloud, but they deploy the model to an API endpoint or the cloud, but they really can't scale it up. The requests aren't there. The platform team isn't skilled enough to understand like what kind of data is coming in, or they're not building out feature pipelines or something, and they're not managing the data that comes in. So scaling is a big issue. And then the biggest one I've seen is users and monetization. Just because you can build an AI, or just because you have the data, doesn't mean it's going to be useful for a customer. Or even if it's useful for a customer and there is a need, doesn't mean that they have profitability out of it. The market might exist, but there might be no product market fit. You might have a need, but the customer doesn't know. So in that regard, you have to have a lot of steps that get them to that point, whether that's educating the customers, introducing them to intermediate steps. We've seen this a little bit with Meta and the metaverse. So they started out initially trying to say, hey, we want to put a metaverse. But no one understood the need because the need wasn't there. No one says, well, we need to spend our time in there. And they were missing out the intermediate step, which was how to interact with users. So Llama is that middle ground. Also for monetization, what's another one? Something I saw at one of my old works. They put in a computer vision tool to be able to look at parts that you had and say, oh, okay, can I look this up on my e-commerce website? But the users who would do that and understood it and trusted it, they weren't there. They said, oh, this is nice, this is a novelty. And that's one of the challenges with the users in monetization. Is it solving a need, or is it a novelty that they like to toy around with and then no longer use, which no longer justifies the cost of an AI product? You need an AI product, you need a product focus to drive return and adoption of AI. The product focus is important because it puts the business need first. You think about what the business needs. You think about what the customer needs. And then you think if there's a total market there that exists to be able to make the AI useful. Otherwise, you're just better off just using rules or a software product. That's important because it's that continuous returns that drive AI adoption. Some of the biggest projects that I've seen in some of the companies I worked with were very simple, but were driven forward because of the executives, because the users saw a return, a consistent return. So product focus helps show that there is a business, it's tied to the business value and tied to the business model. So why do we need AI products? I mentioned this before, data as an asset. So curated data is reusable. So the good thing about a curated data is it allows multiple AI products, multiple data products. Or if you're not even having a data product, just data that you can use for digital. That's important because it's inexhaustible if you curate it the right way. And also if you set up the infrastructure, data infrastructure to do that. Data becomes a flywheel where you can be able to create multiple AI products or multiple different types of products that can increase over time. So personalized experience. So more and more they're like increasing, more and more when I've done recommendation systems, there's been more of demand for personalized experience. So normal recommendation system, you go on the website and we're guessing your behavior. We don't really know if you want to buy a bag of chips. We just know that you clicked on the bag of chips a couple times. With the personalized experience for like LLMs or that sort of thing, it at least allows you to put it more narrow. You can put a customer into a customer workflow instead of guessing the customer workflow. And they can have feedback, whether it's sentiment or data of how they responded, to see like how to recommend them the right products at their choice. And cost reduction and augmentation and enhancement of workflows. So this is a big one. AI doesn't replace you. AI just enhances what's already there. If you had a rules-based, if you had something, let's say a good example here. If you had an ATS, for example, that's just reading through different parts, the AI is not going to replace that. The AI is just going to say, okay, it's just going to give you more detail and more features to look at rather than doing that. Also, it reduces customer user workflows. For example, if you're a software engineer, by like, for example, Copilot or that new Copilot workplaces. You can get the context and you could code a lot faster. But you still need the knowledge to be able to know what to search. Otherwise, you're putting something that someone came up with. And then competitive advantage. Strategically, competitive advantage comes from who can turn around things the fastest, who can mass enough resources in the right place, and who can do faster time to market. Assuming that a framework and a system is built out around AI products, you can create faster operational workflows, and you can create faster customer workflows that puts them in the pipeline faster and shortens even the sales funnel. So you can create a competitive advantage around data, augmentation, and enhancing what you have already. So what are AI products? So there's technology component and a business component. First, of course, is data, which I mentioned before. You need data to train the algorithm. You need to be able to keep sourcing that data to train the algorithm, and you need to keep augmenting it to adapt to changing conditions in the environment, concept-driven and data-driven. Algorithm, of course, the model that you're training on, and then you're fine-tuning. Also, platform. So you have to still serve the model. The model on itself doesn't exist alone. There has to be an API to do it. There has to be something to reduce the amount of latency for product experiences because different product experiences vary. It's the last mile problem. So you have to make sure that they can be able to interact with the outputs of your model. Because we're not just saying, okay, look, there's a binary code here. We have to be able to see it in a format that a human can understand. And then for our business components, monetization, they have to have a path to profitability. By path to profitability, I mean a roadmap. It's not, okay, we have a model, we're going to do it and build it and they will come. It's saying, okay, we have these intermediate steps on the roadmap. What can we do now that can build profitability into the model to justify the next iteration of the model? User and customer. This goes back to the novelty that I was talking about. The user has to know that it exists, the benefits and how to use it. So there's a lot of customer education around it. So for a business that's adopting it, it's educating the users who build it out. Because people see it and say, and someone mentioned this earlier, oh, it's going to take away my job. Well, no, not really. It only augments their workflows if they understand how it's going to help them, and how it's going to make them build more efficiently, faster, and better. For customers, it's, okay, it's not a toy. It's something that I can consistently use to solve my need. And that takes a fair amount of education, whether it's developer relations, those demos we see online, or even workshops. And then the business model. So that's the main one here. The products must enhance a business model. So revenue generation and differentiation. The business model is big because that's how the business makes a profit. It makes no sense, for example, a car company trying to create a AI model chatbot that talks about, planes. It makes no sense. Or one that tries to help the customer walk through the order. Tries to solve all the questions around an order. You should be able to make it so that it enhances what is there already, how they do it. For example, with a customer, something that walks them through the sales pipeline. So they go to the website for the car place. It asks them what their model is, what their preferences is, and then walks them through the sales pipeline based off those preferences, and then suggests to them 2 or 3 items that they can look at. So AI product tip. So I mentioned this before. Products enhance and augment existing models, needs, and processes. The needs already exist, the processes already exist, and the business model already exists. That's the foundation, and for AI products, you have to build on that if you want to be able to get the right data, to build the right model, and get the customers to make it profitable. So what do they enhance? So these are specific features I've found. So they're enhancing a specific existing feature, create a new feature, or create a new product that requires AI. The lowest hanging fruit is, of course, improving the existing feature because people know what the benchmarks are. They know it exists, it's been proven a success by management, and they've known about it for years. Feature that requires AI, that's just something that it enhances. Okay, wait a second. That's more of enhancing what's already. That's enhancing what's there. It's taking an existing rules-based algorithm, rules-based process, and then adding AI to it. And then new product that requires AI itself. So text to video is a good example for that. That doesn't have any rules or anything that exists before it. It exists alone as an isolation. For products-wise, core products is what the business is doing right now for their business model. That's key to enhancing their revenue. Growth product is is more aggressive. So what do they use to be able to expand the revenue? And process augmentation, that's either towards the user or towards the customer. For the user, that's improving their workflows, whether it's trying to read through through tons of Excel documents or trying to be able to look through documentation. For a customer, that's like a code interpreter, trying to understand what's going on in their code. GPT, what do you call it? Copilot's a good example of that. Oops. So that means you have to think build versus buy before you build an AI product. Some of the processes of the AI products, such as the platform, no one's going to build out an AWS bucket or an API there. It's better off sometimes, and sometimes more cost effective, to be able to deploy using that. But the model itself might even exist on your own. Or if you're doing labeling, it's better to think about, is there services that you can buy to label your data? And we have to think about risk management. So ethical AI standards, we have to make sure that the systems are fair, transparent, and accountable. So establish a baseline idea about that. That's really important because it helps protect the product from legal issues and from reputational damage. Privacy and security. I think a few of you mentioned that as well. Making sure that someone's not, it's anonymized. PII data is not accessible to people who don't need it. And then model and data governance. Making sure that the data we're using is not biasing the model. And then model governance. We, the data scientists and the data team, and the executives and the people who are using it know what it's being used for. It's easily accessible. Product tip 3. They need risk management for long-term profitability. So future trends that we're seeing. So there's more integration of it into customer workflows. So how customers use core products, features, and experience them. So one thing I've been hearing a lot more from my mentor was generative AI dashboards. So instead of having your Tableau dashboard say, okay, I built this out, you can type in a few and it can generate sections of the dashboard based off certain data and suggest to you what data sources to use for that. So that would save analysts quite a bit of time. And of course, Copilot environments helps you understand the environment that you're coding in. Optimizing product workflows. So streamlining large customer data. So for that, trying to figure out what the customer's preference are, saving it in there. The other one we've seen with product workflows is what OpenAI is trying to do right now. They are taking the data, but they're also trying to build out the data set, the synthetic data, using synthetic data and generative AI to build out synthetic training sets. So that works by, they take the existing data, they augment it, but the generative AI uses that to build out more features and expand the data set based off that. And then AI platform as a service. There's it's not existent yet from what I've seen, but I've seen this on the Baidu website. They're building out specific models. So training all that data and trying to build out the models yourself can be kind of here and there. You're not always sure if that's going to perform. There's still testing, there's integration testing, all that stuff. With this one, with AI platform as a service, the models already are built out for a specific type of need. So on Baidu, there's a wine one specifically for analyzing wine quality. There's one for, I don't remember, I believe there's an e-commerce one. But the idea is that instead of building out the models yourself, you're bootstrapping with an existing model that's already been trained on the data. You have to just train it some more to fine-tune it for your needs. So my final thoughts. So we have to treat data as an asset. So available and usable data makes sustainable AI products. That means we have to have processes to be able to curate that data, to be able to know why we're using that data. And as far as product goes, be able to do data discovery to do opportunity discovery the right way that focuses on, on determining what the needs are and then translating to that into what data that we need to source. So think augmentation first. Your AI opportunity already exists. It's there. It's probably not, it's not exciting. It's probably not exciting. It might be even just something that's just rules-based at this point, or as simple as a spreadsheet. And of course, they drive innovation. So profitable AI products fuel future AI iterations at your organization. It shows, it's not just a proof of the AI, but it also gives a benchmark for what you can build off of it. So if you know what the benchmarks are, then you can justify more iterations on that AI product or on the model, or even going from a simple ugly model to something as big as a deep learning. And that's it. Thank you for listening to me today.
Well, let's do a Q&A.
Yep.
You guys have questions for Matt? I know it's a lot of information. It's all processing. Well, I'll throw one at you. So do you see, is there any special considerations we have to make when building AI products as opposed to any other product?
It's the data. So in normal product management, you go through 2 stages. You go through discovery, you go through opportunity discovery, and then you go through the solution building. In this case, it adds the 3rd step in between, the data. So it's opportunity discovery, data discovery, and then solution building. a common problem that I run into is where people either do the opportunity discovery and then goes towards the solution building. They forget that the data exists and they don't even know if it's available or clean enough in the right format. One thing I did as a data scientist before was I started with the data, I didn't ask about the solution, and then I didn't ask about what the opportunity was and then try to build the solution. So being able to go through these 3 steps is important. The AI product manager isn't actually touching the building. They're trying to clarify around the requirements. So the requirements around, like, is this an operational requirement? Is this a requirement that we can do now? Is this a strategic requirement? And we need to set that aside to break it down. Then from there, trying to figure out, okay, so what do we need for the data? Then what do we need for the algorithm? So the data is the big part here we need for an AI product.
So are we going to see more and more AI product managers, do you think?
Likely right now, from what I've seen, the current AI product managers are often data scientists or ML engineers or a product manager that's been shoved into the role. So like one thing I've seen was lead data scientists or even lead ML engineers like doing some of that work. They're working beside the product manager, but they're acting as, I would say, a technical bouncing board to be able to clarify the needs out.
Yeah, that's good. I'll pause if we got questions from the audience, give you guys an opportunity.
So, I have a question in terms of the model selection. I mean, if it's too specific.
No, keep going.
So the model selection, when it comes down to business, like when it comes down to selecting, okay, this model, I know that's some sort of inaccuracy versus the other one I can spend more time to get more reliable results. But at the same time, you have your business needs and customers are waiting for that. What would be your advice on time management and moving forward?
Time boxing. You got to time box that because we're engineers. So we do. If we were given 1,000,000 years to build out a problem, we will optimize that until the nth level, and someone is going to get angry at us. We've all done that as interns. But that means we have to do the opportunity discovery the right way, and not just throw it to the PMs. So there has to be someone who's an architect who works with that PM. The PM is the person who clarifies out all these product needs. For example, let's say an AI agent. So asking, okay, so what do these individuals want? Then trying to figure out what those priorities are. So if it's too much of if it's a strategic priority, that requires some sponsorship or even a sponsorship even at a C-suite level or someone who's an advocate. You may or may not have the credibility to pull that off. So you might want to go for smaller stuff like quick wins. So start with those first. Once you get to those, then you start breaking down the requirements of that and then determining, is this something we can, what is kind of need is this? Is this something we can build now? Is this something we can break down farther? What are the steps that we need to go there before we determine if it's an algorithm? And one of that is like, can we solve this without AI? Like, can we just use rules? If we can use rules, that's a quick win. Because when we need to be able to do AI later, then we can go to management and say, hey, look, we delivered something for you. Let's do AI. And there's a track record of success and credibility at that point. And they know you weren't trying to go for the quickest, shiniest solution.
You're kind of touching on what I always find to be the hardest part, which is determining the level of effort up front. And we as engineers want to solve the world. So what we often think is, oh, we can do X, but then we find out the devil's always in the details, and the level of effort is always more than we anticipate. So what kind of things do you try to do to kind of box yourself in, as you mentioned, or what items do you find the most difficult to determine level of effort on? Because that's usually where we get burned.
Right. I would say the biggest part is determining what the business need is. Because we have everyone's seen the telephone problem where Hippo, the highest paid person tells you, hey, well, I want this. They have an idea because they went to Tableau conference and they heard something that was interesting. And then it went down the chain, which might be doable, but we're not entirely sure. So at that point, you need to have both someone who's acting as an architect, because not all places have an architect, and someone who's acting as a PM in combination with each other. The PM has to be able to manage the expectations and say, okay, is this doable? And the architect has to exist to be able to say, I have to be able to carry this out, but if I carry it out, these are the conditions, to be able to translate it back to the PM, so the PM says, okay, this is what we can do. Usually in those cases, the best way you can do it is to focus on really trying to limit it down to what's doable now. Like what's the initial request? If the request is, say, hey, I need a dynamic pricing model. Well, okay, the management knows that it's a dynamic pricing model and it adjusts, but you come up with the simplest solution ever. You work with your juniors.
MVP.
Yeah, your MVP. You come up with the minimum viable. In this case, with AI products, it's not just MVP. It's also MVD, minimum viable data. So you need to have the minimum viable data. Then you have to have MVA, minimum available data. Excuse me. Don't start putting me on the thing there. Minimal available data, because the data has to exist in order to build something. The data has to be in the right format to even be able to train the model. And then you can build the MVP. But before you get to the MVP, you have to think the product manager and whoever's being the architect has to really communicate with each other to see if it's actually possible. Because path dependence is a big, big problem in this field, because we will go all the way down to halfway down the thing, and then something happens and we realize, oh, we have to build the MVP. There's no way around it because we've come too far and there's too much time, too much money, too much stuff spent on it.
I have a question. So, say for example, you have an application and, like you said, the big hippo calls and says, hey, I want this, right? How do you know when your data or your small little app is good enough for AI? How do you know when your data is really ready to plug into an AI model?
So usually, what I mentioned before is just like we have to see if the case exists. Sometimes they're asking for this case because, in most circumstances, because something exists. So let's say let's use a data engineering, for example. Okay, I need to stop pulling the data manually and downloading the spreadsheets from the cloud, from Google Drive. I want you to build out a data pipeline that pulls from the drive, puts it into some tables inside SQL Server, right? At that point, okay, you have something there. You get the minimum that you can, that exists already, so they know the baseline there. Then you also work with a product manager to clarify out the request to be able to get the minimum viable solution for that. Now, let's talk about the other scenario, where they don't know what they're doing and no process exists. In that case, accelerate and redirect. So say, oh, sure, yeah, we'll do it. You do it the best that you can, and you try and build out the best that you can and see how far you can do that. Go as far as you can with it. So in the process, worst comes to worst, you go through and you're like, okay, you figure out the limitations of your data, figure out the limitations of your infrastructure, and then you figure out the limitations of your team, and then you can still go to management and say, hey, well, I did try, and I did try the best of this, and this is what we're doing. At the worst, they'll find out, if they're smart, they'll find out, oh, okay, so this is what to do. What do you need? And that's great because they're like, oh, okay, so they figured out, they learned the hard way what we needed to start up AI. And at that point, they're more willing to give you, they're more open to talk to you about resources you need. If it's at that situation, that's usually what I find out. And they're a little bit more understanding about your technical explanations.
Got it. Thank you.
Let's see, a couple more minutes. Yeah.
So I have a question. So you mentioned that usually the data should be well formatted and prepared for the model to run or to train to develop those models. But in some real cases that if you would like to build some model based on some new data, though you have some raw data which is not well formatted, but you would like to put those data into as feature for the new models. So what to do? Would you productionize those raw data into a well format first, then develop those models, or you develop the models first and maybe in that case the developer needs to do some more dirty work on the data, right? So after they build the MVP, then hey, you prove the value, then let's productionize these raw data to a well format. So how do you choose which one to do first?
I would say it really depends on the use case or what your timeframes are. If you've got larger timeframes, do the second one. All that the business needs for the product is they want to see if there's something there. If you have smaller needs, if you have a smaller need with the data, like when you want to just augment it, the first one's augmentation, correct? You wanted to make sure
You wanted the data well prepared first.
Right.
Then,
Go with the first if you have time. If not, go with the second. As long as, if there's a time, just be able to understand what the time frame is for the work that you're doing, the use case that you're doing, and also what the actual need. If the actual need is to create a proof of concept without a specific like details, then at that point you can just say, okay, this is the proof of concept, this is where I had. And at that point you can even use that to be able to ask for more resources as needed. If it's more specific and there's the time frame is narrower, yeah, you should probably go for the delivery first. Even if the MVD or the MV or the MVA doesn't exist.
Yeah, this is actually kind of a scenario that when not everything is prepared when you are going to do some project. As you said, actually, in most of the cases, we would like to avoid these kind of things. We would like to do something we can do easily. Yeah, but it just sometimes. Thank you very much.
Yeah, I had to add to that. I had a situation where I couldn't do like the experiments for the models, and they just said no, you got to deploy. I just had to cut out the experimentation. Yeah, the best point to be able to increase the amount of the process and be able to spend more time on specific aspects of the process. You really have to win over the credibility, and you have to show that the results that you're coming with is enough that you can say to them and say, okay, I delivered. Can I extend the process more because I have a benchmark here from the previous delivery? If you give me this, then, and you allow me to do, in my case, experiment tracking, then this will increase the quality of the models. This will increase, let's say, the previous model had lift of, let's say, 15%. Well, you're going to get a 5% more lift off that. So you have to have some sort of benchmark to go to them. If you go to them initially and say, we need to do it, well, they've heard a bunch of developers and data scientists go up to them and say, hey, I need Azure Kubernetes cluster because I want it and I like it and my friend said it. And they've heard it a lot of times. So you have to be able to come with them with some proof of work that you've done well. And then a benchmark to be able to build on top of that to sell it to them.
And one more question. So usually when, for example, when you have a big team and they have a lot of proposals on different projects, and to find which projects is mainly based on their their profit return, right? But on the other hand, you will have another cost with that. When the model is being built and it is online, you need some maintenance effort. In most of the cases, as I know, most of the companies, they don't care about that. They let the model be built first. Yeah. If it is profitable, then let it build first. But on the other hand, the maintenance issue always exists. Sometimes when we build some complex model, it turns out that when someone leaves, then the model cannot be whole anymore. So how do you cite the difficulty of maintenance?
Right. So for maintenance, it depends on the maintenance. So like if it's maintenance related to like you're talking like the model can't be used anymore, or it can't just.
It can be used, but it will be less
effective.
Yeah, less effective, and no one can maintenance it quite well.
It's held together by duct tape.
Oh, okay. I've seen one of those. Yeah. So if you again, it goes back to benchmarks. Get the benchmarks of when it was working when the person was around. Then be able to then get the benchmarks of what you're doing, how the model is doing now. Like if you're talking profitability, look at the benchmarks on there. If you can show very clearly how it's beating those benchmarks, then you can make a case. If it's okay and it's level, well, I wish you would come with me because I wish I could solve that one. But the management has to feel the pain in the wallet. They have to feel the pain in the lost time or whatever process that model is serving. Until they actually see the result being on a balance sheet or on higher latency or on the model just won't even work. It's hard to convince them because you have to be able to do that. You'll be able to have more, like if you were, let's say, but if you have more people, I'll say this, if you've already built up a body of work, you know some people there, and you've built up some sponsors among different departments, or even a C-suite sponsor, which is the ideal one, you'll have much more traction to be able to do this like right away. Much, much more.
And to that, can I add something?
Yes.
I I think one aspect of that is to, besides the architecture, to have good documentation through the workflow in the model, so you can mitigate that risk of someone leaving, basically the team having a void, not knowing that complex algorithm, right? That was done, so I think that,
That's also another one, yes.
because then, you can at least bring somebody and they can pick up quickly. And things are evolving all the time, so documentation has to be kept up as you're working on these models.
Usually the thing that's the least, usually at the end of the project.
Yeah.
You hope someone coded, you hope someone did comments.
Comments? But that's the thing with engineers, nobody likes to write documentation. That's the thing, everyone wants to build
No one
it.
likes to write the code.
Nobody
No.
really reads it,
Yeah.
yeah.
I mean, nowadays, some of the developers, they're clever. They know that if they document and automate everything, then it's the time that they can leave. So to make them more important, they may not do that. So,
Yeah,
That's kingdom building. Higher than you would do that, but yeah.
Yeah,
Sounds like an AI product. Opportunity, automatic documentation. Let's
I
see.
actually have one.
Oh yeah, go ahead.
Okay, I
please.
have a simple question. What are you seeing in terms across the industry as far as a SaaS platform? Which ones are the most common ones that companies are using that have the capabilities to be able to run their models, and storage for their data and things like that?
right. I've used different ones like Google, Azure, and then Google, Azure, Baidu, and then GCP, excuse me. But some of the large Fortune 500s that I worked with, I've only worked with two, so this is a small sample, but they were GCP. They were heavily GCP, yeah, because they liked it because of the user experience. It was easier for their platform engineers and their cloud developers and ML engineers to go through it. Azure was a bit of a problem for some of them, except the really technical ones, because there's a lot of how do I put this? It's stable. Oh, it's stable and it's very secure, but there's a lot of custom builds that you had to do in there according to them. So I feel like, and AWS of course is up there with Google, so it's definitely, I would say AWS, and Azure too. Azure, some places just stick to Azure from what I found out because they're used to Microsoft and they use SQL Server, so they're
Okay.
yeah.
I see. Is Baidu, I know you mentioned Baidu a few times, but is there an advantage? Do they have something that the others don't have?
Baidu is more of an advantage I found out in East Asia. So with Singapore, I've mentioned it before, but they have a Baidu. One place I worked with in Singapore had Baidu and Azure parallel to each other. They're not supposed to share between the clouds, but they found a way to go around it. Don't do that. That's bad data governance, and I saw someone got legally dinged on that in Europe. Don't do that. But they got around that. So they wanted to be able to share their e-commerce data that was in mainland China compare it against their e-commerce data in Indonesia and whatnot. So they were trying to do that, but they had to they kept it in separate areas because they wanted to take advantage of each platform's advantage.
Okay.
Yeah, but the aggregation was a pain. The aggregation was a pain.
Any more questions?
So I work mostly in traditional machine learning, right? So I don't have a lot of exposure to not mainstream AI, I know ChatGPT and the things that are super popular. So it'd be helpful for me if you could give an example of a couple of things that you've worked on that maybe someone from my background wouldn't have heard of or wouldn't have thought of as an application for AI.
Well, ATS is one. The ATS is an obvious one.
What is ATS?
What's it? Applicant tracker system, the notorious one that boots you out. That's an AI product. It's also
Okay.
technically a data product, depending on if you're using rules or sentiment analysis. For your traditional area, one thing I've seen is dynamic pricing. So just normal regression modeling for that sort of thing. Some of that's actually very, very simple. There's not much behind it. It's just putting that in they're not really building deep learning regression models or anything like that. It's just a simple one because they want to keep it they want to just be able to keep it understandable. Some industries, and not me, but I know someone who worked with that, you're not allowed to use deep learning models or anything like that because it's not explainable. They want it to be explainable and governable.
When you say dynamic pricing, so would it be fair for me to say that, or assume that, say for example, as a consumer, I go to Amazon to buy something, and sometimes you see like the next day the price has changed. Are they using AI to do that?
That's probably dynamic pricing, most
Dynamic
likely.
pricing, yeah.
I wasn't in that area, but I was with Brex Systems, but that's most likely dynamic pricing.
Okay. Yeah, because, I mean, it would be almost impossible with all the products they have, right? To keep, you know,
Do it
managing
manually.
pricing.
Yeah.
Even for flights, I guess. I was just gonna ask which ATS.
Even the flights, airlines. I understand.
Oh, I wasn't.
My experience
Oh.
has been,
That's
it's
my
one of the
brother-in-law
most
used to work for
profitable data streams.
Yep.
Is from
They said they
ATS.
have-
I didn't work on it, just one of
This
the
is like 15 years ago.
coworkers I did worked on it. Yeah, so he was talking offhand about some of the stuff.
One of the most expensive set of APIs are often it's XML integration, not even full APIs.
Really?
Yeah, very expensive feed, data feeds, very expensive.
I'm not familiar with ATS. So.
Mostly XML, and it has been recently converting to APIs, but thousands of dollars a month for just access.
That explains why Workday has so many separate individual ones because it's is it too expensive to be able to like create like one unified platform for that?
Because all the data is not in the same format.
Oh, okay.
There's no standardization across ATSs. They're all
Okay.
individually proprietary formats. And so the data feeds, again, are very expensive, like typically thousands of dollars a month for access. I've seen some at $30,000 for API access a month. I mean, they get really insane. Because, say you're a hospital wanting to hire nurses and nurses are in high demand, each different ETS firm will charge you $10 or $30 grand a month for access. And hospitals will gladly pay.
On top of Epic and everything else,
Mm-hmm.
some deep budgets.
Yeah. So, and the data format's insane. So back to your point, the data is not standardized. A lot of
Never.
data ingest and manipulation.
All right. Well, no more questions. Let's give Matt a round of applause.